Hello and welcome to today's webinar, where today, of course, we're talking about the new Class MA opportunities and the really kind of the follow-on from last week, where, of course, we had none other than Mr. Ranjan Bhattacharya talking to us about 10 opportunities and 10 strategies you can apply with the new Class MA PD rights. So I'm delighted to welcome Ranjan back. Hi, Ranjan. I think you're muted at the moment, so I'll just ask you to unmute. Oh, and again, he's just unmuted himself.
Hello.
Hello, Ranjan. How are we doing?
Hi, not too bad.
As you've unmuted yourself, I've just muted you again, trying to click the button to ask you to unmute. So welcome. How are you doing? Are you well?
Very well, very well. Looking forward to this one. It's live, and we're hopefully going to have a look at some of the opportunities that the participants kind of present and see how this all works with live real deals in real time. So that's quite going to be fun and unpredictable, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. So for those that you don't know Ranjan, of course, Ranjan is a property investor developer himself. He's a mentor. He's got a training company, and of course, he's also one of the angels off Sky TV's Property Elevator too. So delighted to have Ranjan here. So of course, last week, Ranjan ran us through a few opportunities really. So I've got your slides here, Ranjan. So I'm going to just ping them up. And perhaps if we just kind of very briefly sort of jump through those, just really, I suppose, first off, if you could just remind us of what Class MA is all about, and then we'll just sort of ping up your slides with all the various strategies, and then we'll just jump into the platform and start showing how we find this stuff, shall we?
Yes. Now I'm just going to ping through this, but if you stay tuned till the end, I've got a webinar next week, which is 90 minutes, which will go through this in a lot more detail with a lot more case studies and stuff like that. So don't worry if you don't get it all this time round. Class MA stands for Mercantile to Abode. It's a new permitted development right that comes into effect on August the 1st. It allows all of these building types that you see on the yellow box to be converted either fully or partially into residential use, which is an amazing enabler. We had PD rights before, and I think what these new ones allow is a lot more things to be done to more property types than ever before. That is the exciting thing. There are a few ifs and buts and conditions that you need to comply with, but those I'll leave for the webinar later on. But it's an amazingly enabling. There, to the extent that there are things, I mean, this presentation that I did last week was to share with you 10 things that you can't do today. To do today would require full planning permission, but from 1st of August, you'd be able to do with these new PD rights. And why this is important, and why what Paul's saying is important, is that its first mover advantage is key. If you know what type of properties you need to be looking for, and you have the tools to enable you to search for those properties and find them and locate them, then you've got a head start in this wonderful world of property.
Absolutely. And I suppose the key things around Class MA are really, as you've got down there, aren't they? So they apply to buildings up to about 16,000 square feet, 1,500 square meters. You can do it in conservation areas. A lot of the old PD rights you couldn't. So kind of quite interesting in that case. There's no dwelling mix to worry about. There's a minimum dwelling size, kind of as with all the new PD, right? There's the minimum dwelling size. You need some natural light. But apart from that, it's pretty simple.
Yes.
So let's just jump into, I've got the sort of the 10 strategies. We just quickly ping through those then, Ran, just to kind of remind ourselves of some of the differences between the old strategies and the new ones. This was the first one that you pinged up.
Yes. Well, under the current rules, you can't do PD on any building that's built between 2013 and 2019. Because when they came up with the PD rules back in 2013, they came up with an arbitrary date stamp, which is stuck. And they basically said, oh, you can only convert stuff that's built before 2013. So what they've changed that to is a rolling date stamp. So basically, you can convert any Class E building into residential use as long as it's been in that use for at least 2 years. So from August the 1st, that pretty much means that buildings built between 2013 and 2019 are all to play for, and newer buildings are built better and they're cheaper to convert.
Fabulous. Cool. Just there's a question in the chat, actually, we're going to come to in a minute. Just going to, for the audience that are watching, if when you pop into the chat, there's a little section that says at the bottom, before you sort of type in the words that you want to put into the chat to kind of send up to us, for us to answer, if you just select all panelists and attendees, then that will put it into the group chat and everybody can kind of see the questions that are coming in. There's a question coming from an S. Leahy, which people then can't see. It's just come through to the panelists. So Ranjan and I can see it, but nobody else can. And we're going to cover this as one of Ranjan's 10 sort of strategies actually is covered by this question that's come through. So if we can put it into everybody rather than just the panelists, then everybody will see that and we can kind of get us all going. So second one, Ranjan.
The second one is, there was no PD that applied to basements under previous rules. That would require full planning permission. So many times, the only provisos are, of course, the basement does have natural light and it's subject to 37 square meters. So we've dealt with quite a few retail to residential conversions where we've been able to use old PD rules to do a flat on the ground floor. We can use PD rules to make the first and second floors into flats, but even if the basement was a minimum size of 37 square meters and had natural light, there was nothing you can do except under full planning. Now we're good to go with basements as well.
Cool. Number 3.
Now, this was a classic, and nominally, under the old rules, we had something called Class G, and that allowed you to build 2 flats above a shop. Now, the thing is, if you had 1 floor above a shop, then you could build 2 flats under permitted development. If you had 5 floors above a shop, then you could still only build 2 flats. Now, you can build as many flats as you like above any Class E building, provided that you have natural light and minimum space standards of 37 square meters. So that's phenomenally enabling.
Absolutely. Number 4.
There was no PD to do restaurants to residential before. All the PD action on retail was confined to A1 and the old A1 and A2 classes. Now, of course, those have been abolished. They've all been included in this super usage class called E. Restaurants are included. So if you've got a NAF fish and chip shop somewhere, or a restaurant basically, and you want to convert it, you can. What we're going to see, by the way, is a little bit of an aside. In the old days, and commercial property investors will be aware, there used to be a premium attached to any lease or property that had an A3 usage, because it was quite hard to get a license or a usage to operate as a restaurant. So if you had an empty shop which had A3 usage, then you could rent it out plus take a premium just for the privilege of signing the lease. Those premiums are going to melt away now, because basically you can make a restaurant in any Class E building. So there's no need for that premium. And I think there'll be a little bit of shuffling of chairs now, as some restaurant sites which just had an A3 license but might not have been in the most attractive locations will be converted to residential use, whereas say a former bank building or something which is slap bang in a great location can now be converted to restaurant use with no planning at all. So we'll see some changes, I think, and optimization to make sure that restaurants are located in areas where they get maximum footfall.
Sure. And kind of notable exceptions, Class E, is pubs. Pubs aren't part Class E, I believe.
No.
Yeah,
no,
question in the chat saying, do PD rights apply to mixed-use properties such as a pub operating in a conservation area? And the answer to that's going to be
no.
Conservation areas are okay actually in terms of Class MA, but unfortunately pubs aren't part of that, unless you can argue it's a pub / restaurant, and the restaurant, the food is the primary use of that building.
Yes,
and then
I mean that is, you've just highlighted the sneaky angle that people do, which is to apply for planning permission to convert. I mean, this is really complicated if you really want to do it, but you can apply for planning permission to convert a pub into a restaurant, and that's often granted. And then you'd have to operate the restaurant for 2 years because it's a Class E then, and then you'll be able to apply MAPD. So it's still complicated. Pubs are not easy.
Sure. I have a little experience of pubs, did quite a few of those, and they were a lot easier back in the day when there was PD rights to convert from A4 down to A1. That was a lot easier than where it is now with pub protection policies and loss of amenities and as a community value and that kind of stuff. So yeah, a little bit more tricky. So number 5.
Yes, this is amazing because under the old rules, you technically had the right to convert the whole ground floor into flats, but in practice, most councils had what they call a local plan, and the local plan really trumps PD, and the local plans usually say words to the effect of we will resist loss of retail units in our area. So what they say is they'll resist loss of retail units, but not retail space. So that's why the way we would circumvent this is to say, well, we'll make a flat at the back, but we'll keep a smaller shop, viable shop at the front. And that way, there's nothing they can do. You've implemented PD, but you haven't contravened the local plan because there's no loss of retail unit space. Now, of course, the new PD rules allow you to convert the entire ground floor into one or more flats if it's not in a conservation area. If it is in a conservation area, then you'd still have to maintain a shop at the front, but you can do something in the back. They say that you can do it if there is, because the council will have to conduct an impact assessment survey on the viability of the conservation area and see whether your development impacts that. Now that I didn't mean to be vague about what a viability impact assessment is. That's exactly what the legislation says. And whenever it's vague and unambiguous, I interpret that as council will say no. So to slam dunk it, not in a conservation area, whole of the ground floor into a flat, conservation area, the back, but keep a viable shop at the front.
Fabulous. Number 6.
You could never do this before. It was pulling teeth trying to convert a dentist surgery into residential use. But now, because these premises are now in Class E and Class MA applies to anything in usage Class E, you can now convert surgeries, GP surgeries, dentist surgeries, kids nurseries, and the like. Now, you do have to demonstrate that there is no demand, you converting these buildings will cause no loss in supply of these, provision of these services in the area. So basically, these are typically closed down surgeries and the like. And in many cases, the surgery has just moved to a purpose-built building around the corner. So there is no loss of provision. Opportunity for you guys, though, is to watch out for buildings which are pseudo surgeries. So remember that only GP surgeries and NHS registered dentist surgeries come under this criteria or this rule that you have to prove that there's no loss of service provision in the area for those services. What the opportunity is sort of pseudo medical places, things that try to look medically from the shop window and the front, but they're not NHS facilities. So you'll see private dentist surgeries, for example, which do not, if they don't take NHS patients, they're not NHS registered, and you won't have to show that test. You also see some private GP practices and other sort of fringy medically things like acupuncture and all of that. If they're not NHS registered, it doesn't matter how much it looks like a medical center. If it's not NHS registered, you don't have to show you don't have to prove any loss of that service provision in that area, which is a useful thing to know.
And of course, they're all Class E now. So
Yes.
where before you would have to prove that losing that doctor surgery didn't impact the local community, they can just go and reopen the nearest office or industrial unit, or kind of they can take an old restaurant premises and then go and sit in. So actually that kind of proving it's not got an impact. Well, there's 5 buildings on the market around the corner with these local agents you can go and take instead. What's so special about this particular one? Well, I've done a bit of fit out. Well, take that with you. That's tenants fit out rather than landlords. So I think that whole proving bit becomes a lot easier with this, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Number 7.
Okay, so yes, under the previous rules, you couldn't do anything on the ground floor of retail space if it was in a conservation area. Now that all opens up. You can target conservation areas and you can do flats at the back with no hassle at all, provided 37 square meter minimum space and of course natural light.
Cool. Number 8.
And one of the things these nasty councils do, because they hate permitted development, they want to control you, they want to control everything that you do in an area. That's why when you submit a planning application, you do so to the Development Control Department. So PD is ordered by central government, and it roughs rail shot over what the planning authorities want. They fight back by doing Article 4s. And Article 4 just means that the council has applied to central government for an opt-out of a particular permitted development right. Now, one of the old PD rights, which was Class M, allowed you to make flats on ground floor retail space outside of a conservation area. Now, the government have scrapped, as from August the 1st, or any local authority that has a Article 4 preventing Class M conversion, those are just scrapped, and you're good to go with Class MA and have some fun with converting those buildings.
Awesome. So number 9, nearly that.
This used to be a bear trap. The amount of people I've seen, they bought this office building, and offices were usage class B1 in the old days. And the issue is if it's a mixed use office. So, for example, restaurant on the ground floor, perhaps a gym on the 3rd floor, but the 1st, 2nd, 4th floors are offices. Under the previous rules, you could, because it's a mixed use office building, you could only convert the floors which were in use as offices to residential use. So you're stuffed with the restaurant and you're stuffed with the gym. Now, of course, most of those mixed uses come under Class E. And so the whole of the building can now suddenly be converted without any impact. Now, those buildings which used to be mixed use, it's basically not viable to convert an office building where floors 1 and 2 is offices, floor 3 is a gym, and 4 is an office. If you got these breakup of the floor plate with the odd non-office use, it wasn't worthwhile converting. But now with MA, that's done away with, and you can convert the whole lot.
Yeah, cool. And actually, that was kind of one of the questions at the start. Was question from S. Lee saying he or she, I don't know what the first name is actually. They've got a mixed-use building and it's got B1 on the 1st floor, but D1 education on the ground floor. So would that fall into the MA PD rights? So
yes.
The 1st floor would. Unfortunately, D1. I think D1 educational. It's part of D1. Is part of gone into Class C, I think.
Sorry, D1 what?
So it's a D1 educational use on the...
Yes. As long as it's not a government one.
Yeah, so you've got...
as long as it's not government college or something like that.
Yeah. D1 is now gone to F1, hasn't it? So that's not part of the new Class C, which means you wouldn't then... So it wouldn't apply to the educational use.
It depends for what educational use, though. If it's like a corporate training center that's not open to the public, The issue
Okay.
with the F1 is it open to the public like a college?
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on what educational use. So like if it was we looked at a building recently which was a boiler manufacturer, and they used the building for educational use to train their staff, their boiler service engineers and all of that.
Mm.
Now that wasn't open to the public, so it doesn't come under the F1 usage.
Right. Yeah,
So
quite.
it depends who. Another one we looked at was a education company that trained beauticians how to do nails and stuff like that. Now that's not a government, it's not open to the public, it's not it's sort of registered. It's not like a college or a university.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, cool. So the college and universities go to F1, don't they? And
Yes.
What's left in D1 goes to Class E. Quite right.
Yes.
Quite right.
Yes.
So it's which bit does it fall into? Yeah, bit more clarification needed on that, I think, but kind of interesting because it's sort of, it may just fall in if we kind of get the right answer to that. So
there's some interesting opportunities there, because it's a bit like these pseudo medical type things, because you try to make your college or learning place look very official. So when you go and see it, it looks very official, but it's not a registered higher education college or something like that, or NHS facility.
Well, we've got the answer actually. So the answer is that the ground floor is educational use of preschool day creche. So you're quite right.
If it's registered, that would be a problem.
Is it? Or is that the if it's a preschool day creche, then creche is on my little Litchfield's idiot cheat sheet I was looking at down here.
That's a good one.
Says that's now Class E. So the schools and the kind of training centres are all kind of F1, but actually the creches and the day nurseries then are moved into Class E. So so I'd get my planning advice, but that looked pretty positive to me. So so last but not least, number 10. Let's jump on.
Number 10. Well, the other thing is there are certain flats, or sorry, there are certain commercial properties which are outside of Class E, which still have PD rights. And these properties are in the sui generis category. Things like casinos, betting shops, payday loan shops, and hot food takeaways. You have rights to convert those into residential use. What you can do is basically 2 flats above the space. You can make those into you can make the floors above any of these premises into 2 flats, and that's from August the 1st.
Cool. So we've got our kind of 10 strategies. The next challenge now falls to me to go and find some of this stuff. So what I would like to do is I would like to get the audience to put some locations into the chat for me, and we're going to go off and I'm going to blindfold this. This kind of pick a card, any card kind of thing almost, where if I can get you to open up the chat, type in a location you'd like me to go and search. Got the first one come through for St Albans. We'll kind of work through a list of these. Gosh, we've got quite a few. So so let's jump on. The first one was St Albans that we had on the list there. So let's just kind of jump into
Craig, I know him. Yes.
Sorry, Ranjan?
I know the guy that's put that up.
Very good. Right. So let's jump into St Albans. Let's go and have a look at that. So for those of you who haven't seen Nimbus before, what it does here is it goes off, it's like a Google powered search. It goes off and it finds centre of St Albans, plots a little crosshairs on the centre there, and then draws a little kind of square around that area within 250 metres and plots all the freehold properties on the map. It then also plots some leasehold properties. This is kind of little clusters of little green L's that are showing as leases. Those are leases from the land registry. So those can be kind of useful when sort of looking today to say, well, actually, is there a lease on this property, and kind of is that going to be a problem for us? So kind of helping us to understand all of that. We've also got some other bits and pieces, but for today, I'm going to kind of ignore that. I'm going to kind of clear this little search off for now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort of jump in and perhaps first off, just start to get our bearings to understand kind of what St Albans is, kind of where it is, and kind of sort of start to understand the sort of the area a little bit more before we sort of dive in and sort of try and find some opportunities in St Albans. So the first thing is, well, there's St Albans, and the M25 kind of runs down here. So sort of just north of London is where this is. The first thing I want to kind of get my head around is kind of what's the quality of St Albans? What's the kind of the values across across St Albans. So what we have in the overlay section of the elite platform, this little kind of average value overlay. And what he's showing me is that kind of central St Albans has an average sale price of all the different houses of about £620 a foot. So I've got a sort of a feel for what that looks like. And what I can see is as I kind of go south, that value sort of drops off. So it drops to sort of £500 a foot. There's kind of a 20% difference between kind of the centre of St Albans and these areas here and sort of the southern parts of St Albans. And those values kind of to the sort of the northeast look pretty reasonable as well. So it's kind of just the sort of the two sort of parts either side. I feel like a bit like a weather girl here, actually, or sort of a weatherman kind of pointing at areas on a map. But hopefully that's kind of clear. The second thing that I kind of often quite like looking at is just kind of whether there's any HMOs around the area. Perhaps a little bit less relevant for today, because obviously Class MA, you can't then convert, you can't use Part L to go off and get a planning consent for an HMO beyond that. But the old Class G, flats above shops, you could do that. So kind of getting a feel for, is there a lot of HMOs across St Albans? There are some, but not vast numbers when you kind of compare that with the likes of Hatfield out to the east, in effect. So I'm starting to get a picture of kind of what this place looks like. What I now want to do is I want to start saying, well, actually, Ranjan has given us 10 different strategies we can go and apply in this area. So the thing I want to now do is just use the Elite Plus system. And of course, this is the much sort of awaited Class MA strategy overlay. So what this is doing is it's going off and it's saying, well, actually, based off the new Class E, which is dear old Lichfields, and kind of what all of that tells us in effect, what are all those uses that are in Class E use? Then it says, well, actually, for each of those properties, do they have a residential feel to that location? So is it kind of a residentially type area? They're kind of properties that are residential nearby it, next door, kind of what's the density of all of that? Does it feel like a residential area? Because what we want to do when we start to convert these buildings, we want to make sure there's a nice marketplace for that building when we go off and target it. What it also does as part of that is, well, based off the use of that building and the kind of the estimated rental level and the kind of regional build costs and the regional yields that would apply to those new Class E properties, does it stack up, broadly speaking, to convert from one use to the other? And really kind of starts to understand, well, actually, which of these then are the most viable opportunities? And it actually breaks back to sort of an indicative return on cost as part of that. So what we can sort of see, for those of you kind of familiar with the other strategies, you'll sort of be used to this kind of idea of the profit levels and the kind of either the out and out return or the kind of the return of in percentage terms being plotted on the map and showing you that in kind of color coded kind of heat map, if you like. So what we can see is that actually some of these sort of high, sort of very warm colors, these kind of red colors as opposed to the blue colors, it means actually these properties have got some higher returns on them, sort of higher return on cost in effect for each of those properties. Just kind of zoom in a little bit, then let's just have a little play around with some of this stuff. Now, I don't know St Albans at all. I've never been there. Don't have a clue about kind of where we are, but it sort of looks like we're sort of reasonably central here. So there's a new look here in TK Maxx and this sort of stuff. My guess, I'm going to look at this building over here. So when I click on the map, what it shows me, this little kind of pop-up appears on the right-hand side. And what it shows me here is there's kind of firstly a link to the title number. So I'm going to see more information about the property once I kind of worked out whether I like it in kind of headline terms or not. There's the address. It says Queen's House in St Albans. It's a 13,500 square foot office building. Office is obviously now a part of Class E, thanks to dear old Lichfields. And what it's then saying is that, of course, when we looked at the average sales prices across St Albans, it was £620 a foot. Now, of course, if we build a nice new swanky scheme here with nice new kitchens, nice new bathrooms, kind of some sort of NHBC guarantee or something like that, the value of that's going to be quite a lot higher than the average sales price. So Nimbus has done a little calculation to say, well, actually, the new build sales prices around there, we would expect to be about £740 a foot, based off the average of sort of 620. There's obviously 13,700 square feet of that building, which means that once that building's built, I've chosen quite a big one here, so apologies for this, but it's got a £10 million GDV. So assuming that we can convert all of that office into residential, which is 13,500 feet, it'll sell for about £740 a foot, which is just under £10 million. It's then said that the conversion costs, which are typically about 2/3 of new build costs across St Albans, so we're kind of estimating St Albans is about £200 a foot new build, something like that. And so sort of 135 is sort of a sensible conversion cost. Certainly the sort of schemes that we've done historically, that sort of 2/3 of new build cost gives you sort of a sensible budget for in essence, removing all of the internal walls out of a building, kind of a bit of changing of partitioning, so kind of taking all of the sort of plaster work back, rewiring, replumbing, splitting the stuff out, splitting the individual units out, and this sort of stuff. And so 2/3 is kind of usually kind of quite a good starting point for that. Usually you're not re-roofing, you're not kind of necessarily changing the windows and this sort of stuff, but it's sort of a sensible starting point for all of that. What is then said is that actually rental levels around there are expected to be about 23 quid a foot for that kind of quality of office building in that location. And then if we were to pay 5.5% net initial yield, because this is St Albans, it's a sort of a good part of St Albans, it's 600 quid a foot, average sales price has got a really good sort of strong area. Then if we paid 5.5% for that, that would break back to a tickle under £400 a foot in effect. We've got 13,500 feet, so the cost to buy it would be about 5.25 million in effect. And what that would leave after we've paid for all of that, so we've sold for 10 million, we've converted it for 1.8, we've bought it for 5.2, just over. That would leave 2.8 left over, and that would be a 40% return on cost based on those numbers in effect. Just giving this little kind of indicative appraisal, kind of a glorified fact packet, if you like, of broadly speaking, what are the kind of numbers around this? What would those kind of conversion costs cost? What would it be worth when it's built? And does that kind of stack up? And that kind of then gives us a good understanding that actually this building should be more viable than the one next door, which then should be more viable than this one. Just kind of helping us understand where are the really kind of genuine opportunities to convert one to the other from this Class E into a residential use in that location. There's a few sort of assumptions down there.
The one next door.
Sorry, Andrew. Sorry, Ranjan.
What does it say for the one next door?
Let's have a look.
The percentages are the return on cost, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So next door is saying that actually it's a slightly better office building in effect. So it thinks that the rent for that is 25.50, whereas this one here was 23, I think. So it's just saying it's a slightly better quality of office next door than this particular one, and therefore it's saying, well, the sort of the value is slightly higher to buy it, which means the profit level is going to be slightly lower as part of that. But the conversion cost, I think, should be the same, I believe. Let's have a look. Yeah, 135 quid a foot conversion cost. This is a slightly smaller office. It's 2,300 square feet rather than this was 13,000 feet. So it may be you're getting a slight discount for quantum.
Sorry, say that. Okay. Okay. I should declare an interest. The one that you're doing right now is the building that we're in.
Is it?
Yes.
Wow.
But we have. I mean, this is a nearly 11,000 square foot building. So it seems as though it's pulled out one of the floors, not that one, the one that said 29%.
This one next door. This one.
Yeah.
Saying 2,300 square feet of Class E.
That's pulled out one of the floors.
There you go.
So it's saying that rented out individually.
Yeah, so the ground floor is in that Class E use.
I see. So but the rest of it is offices. It doesn't pick it up as a. It has different rates assessments for the different floors. So it hasn't picked it up as a whole building. It's just picked it up as individual.
Ground floor up on that one, yeah. Put the ground floor up. It may well be that it depends where it's accessed from as well. So I don't know if you access it through the main part of it. So it may be that
it is. It's all one entrance.
Yeah. So maybe just kind of from the one next door. Fancy picking your office building out, Ranjan. That is just ridiculous, isn't it? It's like, dearie me, it's a fix. It's not a fix, trust me.
There's my car in the car park on that one. You can see my blue car.
What rent are you paying on it, Ranjan? Let's just check whether the rental levels. It's saying 25 quid a foot is about the right kind of number. And sort of saying 5.5% yield.
That probably won't be on there.
Yeah.
Because it's done as serviced offices.
Quite cool with this is just understanding what that rental level is. Now, in fact, we've got to sort of feel like I should be jumping into our test system because we've got a release coming out this evening. Rather, so a little yellow band came across the system saying that there's going to be a release tonight, which is we're sort of upgrading our commercial availability so we can sort of see all the office buildings that are on the market all around it, and we can use that. And in fact, I might just do that in a second.
Oh, wow.
So I might just do that in a second. We'll look at the new commercial availability. So that's kind of quite useful as part of this, is to understand, well, what is that quoting rent? What are the quoting prices around there? And saying, well, actually, is any of this stuff on the market as well? Because the sort of the understanding of that is there kind of a willing seller as part of that sort of kicking around there, basically. So once we found a building that we like, we're not going to go and try and kick Ranjan out of his office. We'll go for the one next door rather than that one.
You can't under MA.
Sorry?
You can't under MA. There's a vacancy.
Well, this is a good question, isn't it? It's like, can you? Because it needs to be empty for 3 months, doesn't it, before you can implement your Class MA PD rights. But one of the questions that kind of goes through my head is obviously you've got Section 25 notice, you can serve that on grounds demolition and reconstruction, move the tenants out because of that. And typically when you're doing that, you'd want to have a planning permission up your sleeve to say, well, here's my planning permission that I've gone and got from the council, so I can now implement this scheme. And then off the back of that, you kind of need to move out. You have to pay your compensation to the tenant as part of that.
Unfortunately, it's chicken and egg. If you want the possession back, it's Schedule 30 Ground F. The landlord wants to demolish or reconstruct the building. There are 3 tests that you have to comply with. You've got to show you've got the intent to do the conversion or the redevelopment, and the test of that is you've got to have planning permission. So if you were doing it under planning permission and you've got planning approval, then yes, you can toss them out. But if you're doing it under MA, it's chicken and egg. You can't invoke that ground until it's vacant. You have to wait 3 months. You have to have 3 months of vacancy before you can apply for the MA, and then you get it. So the reason they've done that is because although they've widened the range of properties that you can do MA on, they didn't want existing tenants to be thrown out.
Clever.
So you can't use that ground, Section 30, Schedule F, Ground F. You can't use that with MA, is the short answer.
Let's try non-payment rent then, or
you have to use one of the other grounds.
Letting of of 2 parts together gives you higher rents, or vice versa, splitting it up on this sort of stuff, isn't it? So sure, if you're creative enough, you can throw a few grounds at them and then maybe have a conversation about having a sensible surrender premium, maybe something like that. Maybe. So what we then do is kind of, if we are interested in say that building, we just add that property to our workflow, pop it into a stage that we've got there, click save. That'll pop a little pin on it, saves it into this little section called workflow, which incidentally as well is getting a big upgrade tonight as well. So with the upgrades happening tonight, kind of that's all part of it. And then from there, it's a very simple job, just to mail campaign the owners of this. There's a little download button in there that kind of gives you a list of all the properties that you found with the owner's details in it, and you just send those letters out with a little mail merge or doc mail or stamp or something like that to go and send those letters out in effect. So that's the kind of process. I feel like we should just have a little play with this as well. So you didn't see this, you certainly didn't see this on the webinar with about 120 people on it at the moment. So I certainly didn't do this when it. If anybody asks, I didn't show 120 people our test site, but I did actually. So let's just zoom into St Albans down here. And the reason I want to kind of do this is, firstly, is just to bring to life the strategy there, which is the same as the strategy I've just shown you on the live site. For those of you that on Elite, your Elite system will look like this tomorrow morning when you log back in again. But what we've now got is this little commercial availability that now plots these on the map as well. So what we can now do is sort of look at those properties that are maybe around Ranjan's office or whatever. So there's a property there that's on the market with Aitchison Rafferty. It's 2,000 square feet to let, which then means we can go and sort of dig around and say, well, what are those kind of rental levels? So that's a couple of thousand square feet at 57 grand. So that's sort of 23 quid a foot that Nimbus was saying the rental levels are. Well, that's breaking back to £24 a foot in effect. So it's very much just kind of giving us that comfort that the numbers are the right kind of levels. But also what's kind of cool with this is actually that particular building has come back on the strategy overlay as well. So it's sort of saying, well, with the strategy, that particular building is on the market, as sort of part of it is available to let, and therefore perhaps if we wrote to that owner and said, well, you've got this part of buildings on the market, I'm interested in selling the whole lot because actually you're probably paying void rates out on this sort of stuff. Then actually it's quite an interesting way of understanding the motivations of that owner. Sorry, Ranjan.
If I can just interject, I think what people have always got to do also is go because I think these tools are fantastic, but the final mile, or to actually, it gets the ball on the green, but to finally putt it in the hole, sometimes you have to go a little bit manual. For example, that piece of data where we looked at the rental value of that particular building, it's important to then just check that what else is on the market and whether there's a reason for that being the price it is. Now, I happen to know that that building is basically, they're trying to sublease it. So the existing tenant doesn't need the space. They've only got 3 years left on the lease or something like that. And they're trying to lease it for the remainder of their term, which is one of the reasons why the rent being quoted is much lower than the average in the area. So I think it's very important to go the last mile to dig out the actual specifics. This gets the ball on the green.
Absolutely. It's kind of, I suppose it's really that kind of opportunity to kind of to cast that sort of appraisal, that fag packet, the uses work, the numbers kind of stack. It's not a formal red book valuation, that's for sure, but it's getting it kind of all lined up and saying, well, these are the really viable ones, and those are the ones that, if you're going to focus retention, those are the ones to go after, rather than the stuff that I'm just getting sent generally, or whatever it might be.
Absolutely.
In effect,
I've been told off for saying back of a fag packet, back of an envelope these days.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. Back of an e-cigarette or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. How the world changes. So that's kind of given us hopefully an idea. And I suppose some of the other stuff that's kind of often interesting is perhaps some of this sort of bit more offices. I feel like I should move out of St Albans, because we're sort of, I always think when you're messing around in somebody else's back garden, it's kind of one of those things. You're telling them stuff that they already know, and it's kind of so. Maybe I shouldn't have picked St Albans off the list. Maybe that would have been. Let's see what else we've got in the chat. Should we see what else we've got? So we've got St Albans. Gosh, we've got a big long list of all sorts here, haven't we? Let's. Do you want to pick one, Ranjan? Do you want to see where you'd like to go next?
What about Grimsby?
Grimsby.
Let's see whether it's grim in Grimsby.
Cool. Well, this is going to be probably more challenging. So let's just kind of explain.
It's a lower value area.
Let's explain why. Yeah, exactly that. So let's just kind of get rid of this before it sort of displays the answer for you. And let's pop these on. So this is kind of why Grimsby is difficult, and why Ranjan's thrown me that hospital pass. So the reason why he's done that to me is that basically the average sales prices across Grimsby, in parts of it are 60 quid a foot, some are kind of 120. And so if you kind of think, well, what does it cost to build residential across most of the country? It's about 150 quid a foot. If we go up to these areas, you may well get that a bit cheaper, maybe sort of 120 a foot, something like that. So if you're converting buildings, you're probably paying 80 quid a foot to convert it, something like that, which means that if you've got a sale price of £150 a foot and you're spending 80 to convert, and you want 25% return on cost, there's not going to be an awful lot you can afford to pay in order to convert those properties. So actually, I suspect when we put the strategy on in the centre of Grimsby, it's going to be very difficult to find Class E buildings that will convert. We may find some shops of uppers, actually. So we may find the old sort of just the upper parts that perhaps might convert in parts of Grimsby. But I think what's often useful with this at the same time is saying, well, actually, where would I search instead? So where should I be searching? If I'm going to try and do some Class E conversions under Class MA, then is Grimsby the right place for me? And the answer to that really is, with those sorts of values, it isn't. We'll do a little search just to kind of to prove that. But then what I would kind of suggest we do is we just sort of scoot down around here and have a look around these sorts of areas, and actually perhaps even scoot up here. So we're probably driving somewhere to our nearest investment rather than sort of doing it on a doorstep in Grimsby. We may also then think about that kind of HMO use as well as part of that, and sort of see whether there's some HMOs there that might kind of drive us some high yields. Perhaps we get sort of a reasonable return on cost through the HMO route. But in essence, I think the Grimsby centre is going to be remarkably difficult. And let's just see if Nimbus agrees with me, and I suspect it will, but let's just have a little look. So there's a few bits. There's the odd little bit. Let me get rid of the ownership information. So the average sales prices. So we have got the odd little bit, and what we'll probably find is like a little bit of a store somewhere, or kind of just something there. So there's a day nursery there that's sort of £650 a foot. It's got kind of a £200 a foot sale there. So kind of sort of the better part of Grimsby, that part down to the south. That is driving a sort of a 30% return on cost. So you might just get something away based on a sort of a £200 a foot sales, sort of new build sales value in that part of town. So it's picked up sort of the better parts of Grimsby, where sort of some of this stuff might work. Something there that's sort of 40% as well. So what's that? That might work as well. Little office there. So it's a £5 a foot office. It's kind of quite a poor office as it currently stands. 1,500 square feet, and that would sort of broadly speaking stack up. It's quite a small office that it's brought back. So that might work as well, actually. What you should find, though, is that sort of central Grimsby, as we said before, there's going to be very little coming back because those values are so low. So there's nothing there that's been brought back. And sort of when we go out towards those sort of the better parts, that's when it's sort of starting to bring some of these opportunities back. So a little shop there that's 3,000 feet actually, set to McColl's. That might be a challenge, but you might just get away with that. But it's sort of very low value stuff in Grimsby. My guess is that McColl's might pay slightly more than sort of £6 a foot for that. But in essence, that's kind of where I think Grimsby's tricky, albeit it's bringing a few bits and pieces back. Again, you might just get a little bit with the shops uppers strategy as well, that will sort of bring perhaps a couple more opportunities back as part of that. But it is sort of struggling with that core underlying residential value that really isn't sort of strong enough to generate opportunities there. And if we sort of just kind of switch our minds down to what I said otherwise, then what we'll see is that as you kind of move into those areas where the values are stronger, of course, there's opportunities then come forward. And that's kind of where that sort of comment from me saying, well, Grimsby looks a bit challenging, Ranjan. Thank you for the hospital pass. In essence, that's kind of where that's sort of demonstrating that actually, if we were looking at Grimsby, then perhaps sort of a short drive down to sort of Louth would actually give us a few more opportunities that we kind of have a little look at. And that's because the values are slightly higher as we kind of get outside the centre of Grimsby.
Generally speaking, Paul, what I normally say to people is you'll normally find opportunities in areas where values are close to the and above the national average. So if the national average is roughly about 250 grand for a property, then you really need to be looking at areas where the values, average values of properties are 220-ish and above. Absolutely. Then you'll get a nice, comfortable margin.
Absolutely. And that's kind of what that's kind of saying there is that there's bits. So the average sales price of 175, which means that sort of £200 a foot, 225 a foot is probably where it's kind of the new build sales stuff is, which then means that you're at that sort of, I don't know, 200 grand for a 3-bed semi kind of thing. So your average, 4 beds, probably 225, 230, 240, something like that, which means you're in that kind of ballpark of this stuff starts to stack up a bit. The higher those values go up, of course, the more you can afford to buy in effect, because the residual values are much higher for those opportunities. So as we then move across, if we dip down some of these places, you'll find there's an awful lot more around there because of the sort of those strengthening values in effect.
Maybe we should dip down to areas like Bristol, Maidenhead, Romford that people have suggested.
Yeah, sure, let's do that.
The average prices should be stuff that we will find a lot more.
Yeah, and that kind of demonstrates, sort of helps to sort of show this in effect, is that you've got these very red opportunities, kind of these very hot opportunities, lots and lots of value in these areas. Lots of this will be, I suspect, retail along this part of town. Then as we sort of move out of town, there'll be sort of various bits and pieces that are perhaps kind of interesting. What's that? Oh, it's like a office building that kind of perhaps could be interesting, some residential all around it. This sort of stuff's kind of often interesting as well, where you've kind of got these areas that are surrounded by residential with these kind of commercial buildings in the middle of them. And so sort of very easy to go and pick all this stuff out. Let's a little sort of zoom out and pick some of these, maybe what kind of this sort of stuff. I guess there's little retail units on the end. Yeah, a little shop there on the ground floor with sort of 700 square feet, just enough for a single unit maybe. Some of these sorts of things. This is kind of your sort of vehicle repair shops that are then now part of Class E. So you've got sort of 2,500 feet there. £6 a foot. It's probably about £80 a foot to buy it. £100 a foot to convert it. You might just make more kind of comprehensive than that on it, but that would still leave a 400 grand profit on it, because the sales prices in this part of Bristol are sort of 350 a foot sales value. So kind of multiplying that all out, we've kind of got a sort of a 90% return on cost, which is pretty hefty, given there's very few opportunities around Bristol, to be frankly. So maybe we've got kind of a bit more scope to pay a bit more than £200 200,000 a foot, maybe pay £100 a foot for it rather than £80 a foot. Plenty of margin in that to unlock all of that. I suppose that then also kind of drives into that, perhaps that HMO opportunity with it as well. So kind of where are all the HMOs, and are we in that sort of HMO area? Kind of interesting in terms of some of that actually. And that's perhaps where some of the other strategies around the HMO conversions kind of can be kind of useful with that, to sort of see, well, what is that? Is there Article 4 in place, and what's the density of residential versus HMOs around there? And is there kind of scope to then take the residential units you're creating and then apply for the sort of a full application to convert that from residential into HMO thereafter, of course. So hopefully that's answered the question. Should we go somewhere else, Ranjan? Is that kind of showing that sensibly?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Where are people saying? There's Romford is an interesting area.
Romford, yeah, Romford.
The reason I flagged it as an interesting area is, one, it's high value, and it's one of these areas where there's a lot of London is like this, where the shopping region is sprawling. There's so many streets there's so many streets and streets of secondary parades where you won't see the brands you'd recognize. And those sort of areas, I mean, in many parts of London, what used to be in the 1930s discrete towns have now just been linked together with roads, which just comprise entirely of secondary shops. And a lot of those will be really up for grabs. Yeah,
sure. So that probably is, I suppose, this sort of stuff, isn't it? I guess is kind of what you're saying, is that sort of secondary retail pitch. So there's your obvious stuff to go and convert, and that's the reason that one's coming back, is that it's kind of, you know, this sort of residential feel to the kind of location. I guess this then is the kind of thing you're talking about, isn't it? In terms of where you've got these sort of secondary retail pitches where it sort of feels like some of it needs to change. And yeah, as you say, there's kind of these sort of strong values. I'm taking your word for that. Let's go and just prove that for a second. So, you know, £400 a foot average sales value. So these sort of four ratings like that, I suspect. And that's then sort of picking out the little day nursery that's stuck around the back at 600 square feet, with a sort of £250,000 profit on the back of it, sort of 500 to buy it, and worth 750 when it's done, sort of 60% return on cost off the back of it in effect. So assuming a sort of a £14 a foot rent and 7% yield to buy it in effect. So I guess that's the sort of the simplicity of it all, really. It's kind of working through. It's quite a lot of opportunity all round, really, isn't there? Whether that's offices, whether it's is that offices there? That was an office as well, wasn't it? The sort of the sort of nurseries, all those kind of wider Class E uses, obviously. So that kind of brought that to life, Ranjan. Do we feel like we've kind of found some of that sort of stuff? I guess there's perhaps a retail sort of element to this we should be looking at as well. Should we be looking at the units at the front here? I suppose looking at how we'd find the conversions on the ground floor as well. I guess that retail there, that's offices.
I think what it does is it highlights in a particular geographic area the sites, which is very useful. Now, of course, it doesn't actually say whether it's for. I think I would use this in a couple of ways. Let's say I'm looking at a site. It may be on sale at an auction or whatever, or on sale with an agent. Then I can use this to look and see whether what Nimbus says about that particular site that I'm looking at in comparison to other sites which are in the immediate vicinity, which may not be on sale, but I can see the potential of the site that is on sale in comparison to what else is available in that geography. That's very, very powerful. And also I've got a little bit of a head start on direct to vendor. Because with direct to vendor, of course, you've got to pay £3 a shot to get your land registry searches. So if you did a criteria and say, well, okay, I want to pay £3 a shot for anything that has a return on cost above 30%, then that would be a good targeting of that direct to vendor budget.
Sure.
So there's some very interesting uses of this.
What's kind of interesting with it as well is that sort of, especially in this kind of Class E use, a lot of Class E is owned by little companies, little, it's a lot of it's not owned by individual people. Yes. And of course that then within the Elite system and the Elite Plus system, that ownership information is shown in the platform. And of course that then translates straight through into the workflow and the sort of download out the workflow to go and do letter campaigning. So you haven't got to go and pay your £3. So in this kind of particular bit, you end up being able to send letters out much more quickly and much more cheaply, because you're not paying your £3 each time to find out who owns the properties and where they are to go and get in touch with them. Yes. It's all just provided through the search directly on the system.
That's for the ones owned by limited companies and
exactly that. Exactly that. Yeah, and so there's certainly quite a few of these usually are. So you'll probably find I can't prove that now, but well, there you go. So Black Hole's properties own that particular property. So again, no need in that case to go and pay you £3 for the information. That will just translate straight through into the workflow, and then it's kind of a trivial thing to go and send your letters out off the back of that, in effect.
What I find useful, I'll share a little tip, because I'm obviously an avid user of this, is that there's a button you can press. You can see all the properties that they own.
Yeah.
Do you want to just show them that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So this one,
you can see all the properties.
Absolutely.
Now,
yeah.
What I find is if you press that button and you see about 100 properties that they own, the chances are that that company is not going to be, that company is going to have a few people there. There's going to be levels of staff and all of that. And for them to jump up and down and respond to your direct to vendor letter might be limited. But the ones I love, I send it anyway, but the ones where you'll get a lot of opportunities where the company just owns under 10 properties. But the reason for that is you tend to find that the control and decision making is rested in one or two people. So you tend to get a response, basically.
Absolutely.
I'd send them out anyway, but just to gauge the likelihood of getting a response.
Absolutely. And I think what you kind of find, so this is that portfolio and kind of what they've bought over time. So they've had a sort of a flurry of activity in the early 80s, a couple of bits in the 90s, and then sort of the odd property bought sort of 5 years ago or so. So they're not kind of crazy active, buying a load of stuff and selling a load of stuff. And it just kind of gives you that understanding around that business. And actually, I suppose the other thing you can do with this is you can sort of just dig into kind of what that company is. So it's Black Horse Properties. They're a development company, building projects is their kind of SIT code. Go to the accounts, go and see what the turnover was, what the balance sheet looked like, who the people are to get in touch with. So
click on the people. Now, this is the thing. Now, after this webinar, this poor Black Horse Properties is going to get 100+ letters now. Okay, we've found out that this company doesn't own that many properties. We've also found out the pattern of their buying. And when you see buying in the 80s, that means they're right old farts now. Company's House tells you who the directors are. When you start to see 1950s date of birth, they're of a certain age. So whack that letter off and say, we buy old people's properties. I'd vary the headline a little bit.
Yeah, quite.
Effect.
Perhaps just split test the wording of that letter,
Yes,
Ranjan.
yeah.
But,
Finesse the wording of that. Don't take that.
See where we get kind of traction with that.
But you get the point. I mean, these guys are of a stage in their career where you're likely to get a better response. And the number of people at the core of this company is relatively small as well. So the decision making is concentrated.
Absolutely. Fabulous. There's a sort of few questions in the chat. What I'd like to do now, so I feel like we've shown quite a lot of the system. A quick reminder, really, of what the Class MA is all about. So what it does, kind of the bit that I've just shown you, is that kind of the new Class MA strategy under the Elite Plus system. So that one button is part of the Elite Plus system. The rest of it's the Elite system. What it does is it shows you those Class E properties. It filters the properties that are there to a floor space that's less than 1,500 square meters, that kind of 16,000 square feet size that we talked about at the start. It then applies this kind of residential fields to location. So we know then when we see these properties, there's houses or flats around that property, and there's kind of a sensible density of all of those around there. What it then does is it applies this indicative appraisal, this appraisal on the back of an envelope, fag packet calculation, to look at the regionally specific yields, rents, and build costs that then give us that understanding of should this thing stack up or not, and kind of how viable is it compared with the kind of returns we'd want to be making as a developer. And there's the sort of details that sit on that. So the good news about this is that actually this week was kind of before the Class MA strategy. So the Class MA becomes a thing on the 1st of August. It's actually a deal that we're offering. So the system is usually £600 for that Class MA strategy. We're offering that a discount at £500 for the year before it comes out in effect on the 1st. So if anybody would like to take advantage of that, I have a link I'm going to pop into the chat. And also what you can do is you can get access with our team to a one-to-one demonstration for this. So I'm going to just pop these into the chat now. So there's some little links in there that you can, if you're interested in using that system, signing up to it, having a go with it, then there's 2 links that I've just popped into the chat. The first one is to sign up to the Class MA strategy. And the second one then is to book your one-to-one demonstration with the team if you want to see the Elite system, and then talk to them about the Elite Plus system as well. On top of that, we have some other bits we can help with. So Ranjan, you've got some stuff that you're doing as well that people can attend if they want to.
Yes, I'll just mention a couple of bits. I've put a link in the chat for our YouTube channel. Do subscribe to that, because during the month of August, we're going to be having quite a few videos on site tours, actually, for various MA conversion projects. So there'll be a lot of learning from that. If you're not already a subscriber on YouTube, make sure you subscribe to that and you'll get notified. Make sure you click the bell icon and all of that, and you'll get notified when we release those. So those will be a lot of fun. And I've also got a webinar next Saturday morning where we'll be covering, it's a 90-minute webinar. We'll be covering how to take advantage of the Class MA opportunity, how it works, the criteria that you have to follow, in other words, to make these opportunities work. And also what specifically you need to be looking for, and some real life examples as well. A lot of people come on this 90 minutes and find that one of the most common comments I get is that there's stuff on their doorstep that people walk by every day that hadn't really, their eyes just weren't open to it, or they weren't seeing the opportunity until they'd been to this webinar, and they start to see these opportunities in a different light. There's a lot of stuff you can do under the new rules. The question is, what should you do? And that's what I try to shine a bit of a light on this webinar.
Amazing. And I guess if you've got kind of particular opportunities that you're looking at that you want some help looking at, then of course Ranjan and I are back next week, same time, same place, to run through your deals for you as well. And we'll kind of look at the system. We'll kind of bring the information up around the properties you're looking at, and we'll kind of talk you through our thoughts around what you might want to do with those. We have a little poll if anyone would like to join us. So if you'd like to join myself and Ranjan on the deals clinic next week, and feel free to bring your deals or come and watch and see the other deals that other people are bringing forward on that kind of entirely commercial conversions clinic, then that first question's for you. And if you'd like to join Ranjan for his 90-minute commercial property training session, which is 9 AM on Saturday, the 7th of August, and that second question is for you too. I'll leave that running just for a moment. So there's a couple of things in the chat. So you've got the links for the Class MA strategy with us, so the one-to-one demo, that's in the chat. Ranjan's got his link to the YouTube channel, and of course the link to his free training in the chat as well. There's a question here from Elsie just asking about, is the MA layer limited to a certain number of lookups, or is it unlimited? It's totally unlimited. So the Elite platform and indeed the Elite Plus platform, they're all completely unlimited. You can use it as much as you want to and fill your boots. So that's hopefully that. Stephen's saying less stamp duty on commercial property. So that's quite right compared to residential properties. Is the ownership button available in Elite or just Elite Plus? The ownership button is part of the Elite platform, so it's in both systems. You can use that as much as you want, again, totally unlimited as part of that. There is let's have a quick look. Lots and lots and lots of locations. Apologies, I feel like I've only sort of scratched the surface of the locations that were put forward. Thank you so much for so many entries in there. I don't know how I managed to pick Ranjan's office out of this. It's kind of the most bizarre twist of fate, and I must confess. But hey ho, hey ho, hey ho. So I think we've answered the majority of those questions as part of that. So I'm just going to finish the poll there. And finally, really, I suppose all that's left for me is to say, firstly, thank you, Ranjan, for your time today. Thank you for taking us through the 10 strategies. Thank you for your support today. It's been great to see you. We'll look forward to seeing you next week as well. Yeah.
Oh, that would be the deal analysis. So we want people to kind of bring deals that they find interesting, or deals that might have sold for and they thought that went for a silly price, or deals that are available, anything you like really, or properties that you already own and you're looking for some advice on what to do with them. And we'll use the tools and see what we find.
Go trawl the availability in Grimsby and find us something that that stacks, and throw it at Ranjan for me if you wouldn't mind. So thank you, Ranjan. We'll look forward to seeing you again next week.
Yes.
And then just finally, thank you from me to you all for watching. We've had lots of fun today. Hopefully it's been helpful. We'll look forward to seeing you again soon. I've been Paul Davis. We've been Nimbus Maps. See you all soon. All the best. Bye for now.